Good morning. I'm going to lecture on 50 years of Polish-Philippine relations from 1973 to 2023. During the 118th Philippine Independence Day celebrations in June 2016, the Philippine Embassy here in Warsaw brought to the Teatr Polski the Lady Dance Theater. It performed a survey of key Philippine folk dances. But why the Leyte Dance Theater? The dance company is based in Leyte in the central Philippines, which is the ground zero of the Haiyan typhoon which hit the country in November 2013. Packing winds running at 315 kilometers per hour, Haiyan is considered the strongest typhoon in recorded human history. The typhoon wiped out cities and towns in Leyte and in the eastern Visayas region. The typhoon affected 1.4 million people and it left homeless 14 million people. It killed 6,000 people and left 1,800 missing. To this day, those missing haven't been found. The Leyte Dance Theater therefore performed at the Teatr Polski to impress the 700-strong, mostly Polish audience, how the people of Leyte and the central Philippines have recovered. What the dance company showed via its performance was the culture of resiliency of Filipinos, which is likewise reflected in the history of the people of Poland. It could be said that Filipinos and Poles share a culture of resiliency. I introduced the Philippine folk dance performance in Warsaw in 2016 to indicate how formal diplomatic relations are presaged by cultural or people-to-people contacts. Our two countries may be separated by 9,173 kilometers. We are separated by at least two huge continents, but the distance is more or less bridged by cultural relations. I had expected, in fact, that Polish performing artists had performed in the Philippines after the establishment of formal diplomatic relations on September 22, 1973. But I found no record of such from our cultural center of the Philippines, which was the former cultural ministry of the country. But even without any concert by a Polish artist in the Philippines, Polish arts and culture have always been alive and well in the Philippines because of Filipino classical musicians. In fact, the former dean of the Conservatory of Music in the university where I teach, the University of Santo Tomas in Manila, the former dean, Raul Sunico, former president of the Cultural Center of the Philippines, is a concert pianist specializing in Frédéric Chopin. Filipinos and the Philippines are pretty much at home with European culture because of history. In the case of the Philippines, her relations with Poland and other Western countries were preceded by the Spanish contact in the 16th century. With Spain came the missionaries of the leading religious orders, whose membership was European. Perhaps the first Polish missionary in the Philippines was a Jesuit, Wojciech Misiński, a missionary from Krakow, who stayed in Manila for a few months in 1642 before going to China, Japan, and Vietnam. I am pretty sure the other major religious orders that carried out the highly successful evangelization of the Philippines, the Augustinians, the Franciscans, the Dominicans, and the Recollects, had Polish friar priests or cooperator brothers in their ranks during the 350 years of Spanish rule. During the Philippine Revolution against Spain, a Polish journalist, Ignacy Radliński, wrote an article in Gazeta Warszawska explaining the events that led to the independence movement. These two events, separated by 250 years, should underscore that relations between our two countries are defined by two major aspects. Number one, shared Christian legacy, Catholic legacy, with both countries being predominantly Roman Catholic. And number two, shared legacy of struggle against authoritarian regimes. Our shared Catholic heritage has been evident in recent years. During the Haiyan typhoon in 2013, the Polish Caritas, the Catholic charity, donated some 6.5 million Polish zlotys, and the Polish Humanitarian Action donated 1 million Polish zlotys for the victims. Meanwhile, during the pandemic, Poland gave a grant of 547,100 AstraZeneca vaccines to combat 2019. Our shared democratic legacy is also very, very palpable. The 1986 People Power Revolt in the Philippines ushered in the pro-democracy wave that swept South Korea, Chile, Pakistan, and other countries. The election of Karol Wojtyła as Pope John Paul II in 1978 and the establishment of the Solidarity Union by Lech Walesa in 1980 triggered a train of events that led to the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Incidentally, the University of Santo Tomas, which is the only pontifical university in Asia, had hosted Pope John Paul II in his Philippine visits of 1981 and 1995. It also hosted the visit of Lech Walesa in 2012, during which he was named honorary university professor. Since the reopening of the Philippine Embassy in Warsaw, how have relations fared between our two countries? I will give two updates on key fronts: security and economy. Number one would be defense and security. Like Malaysia and Indonesia, the Philippines has tapped Poland as an alternative source for industrial machinery and military equipment. This was illustrated in 2018 with the Philippines purchasing $241 million worth of a fleet of American Sikorsky 70 Black Hawk helicopters manufactured by the Polish company PCL Mielec. Early this year, 2022, another contract worth $624 million was made by the Philippines for a batch of 32 more choppers. Economic relations. Trade and investment relations are still on a relatively low level, yet they are growing rapidly. In the last 5 years, they grew by more than 120%, from $397.6 million in 2016 to $877.85 million in 2021. The most significant Philippine investment in Poland is the Baltic Container Terminal in the port city of Gdynia, which is run by the Philippines International Container Terminal Services Incorporated. The Baltic Container Terminal is the leading container terminal in Poland and one of the largest in the region. In Poland's maritime industry, Filipino sailors have also played a significant part. Several agreements have been signed with Polish Maritime Administration and the Maritime Training Council in reference to Philippine sailors serving in Polish merchant vessels. We have to improve on the third front, which would be cultural relations. Except for the performance of the Leyte Dance Group in 2016, there has been no consistent cultural exchange programs. Perhaps as both countries enter the new normal of post-pandemic relations, they should map out a more systematic cultural exchange program. This would not be difficult because, as I have pointed out, both share a Latin Christian legacy as well as a vibrant democratic heritage. Polish arts and culture are European arts and culture. They derive from the Greek legacy and the Latin heritage and the Judeo-Christian tradition. As Jerzy Brzezinski declares in 10 centuries of Polish literature, what it is that binds, let us say, German, French, Italian, and also Polish literature together is a common cultural heritage, common roots belonging to a single tradition. And so we might view the literary history of every European country, including Poland, through the prism of the universal European values that emerged under the influence of ancient Greek and Roman achievements, the great religions and reform movements. Within this Mediterranean cultural domain, radiating to Europe's far northern frontiers, various national literatures developed, yet regardless of the language they employed, they always drew upon this universal canon of values. It is also from this same universal canon of values that the Philippines draws her heritage. This means that there is no excuse for Poland and the Philippines not to be closer together. Goodbye.